Inspiring, educating, and at times entertaining. This is the Retirement Years Podcast with your hosts, Mary Ellen French and Dave Wing.
Hi there, I'm Mary Ellen.
And I'm Dave. And today we'll talk about an amazing group of people who step up and come to the assistance of others following a disaster. Unfortunately, across the globe, natural disasters are occurring more frequently. In the United States, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, also known as FEMA, reports that there's currently flooding happening in Alaska, severe storms in Illinois and Tennessee, and various wildfires raging around the country as well. After the initial disaster is over, groups like the Mennonite Disaster Service and their volunteers come in to rebuild homes and revive hope. And we'll be talking to their executive director today.
Tonight, Hurricane Ida slamming into Louisiana as a powerful Cat 4 storm, sending fierce winds of up to 150 miles per hour and surging waters. The life-threatening system.
The dense smoke that shrouded northern Alberta now sits heavy over Calgary.
It's a real hazard.
And in the noses and throats of the people who live there.
I left my windows open last night, and of course my apartment is now full of smoke, so it's not nice.
Hundreds of kilometers north, closer to the source of some of that smoke.
So yeah, unfortunately, those news clips, boy, they're almost every day, aren't they? I mean, Here in Ontario, right, we had wildfires it was late spring and all through the summer, really. Those were happening all across Canada. They were on the East Coast, they were on the West Coast, Ontario, Quebec, and the smoke from those reached so many parts of the United States, which, I mean, boggled my mind. And some of those states were already struggling with wildfires, like California. You know, I think a lot of our listeners understand that natural disasters are becoming more frequent. What may surprise you, though, is that older adults play a big role in helping disaster survivors recover and rebuild. And today's guest is going to tell us how.
Yeah, and I think, Mary Ellen, what's going to be interesting for many is just why and how those older adults are invaluable during any kind of emergency or disaster. Yeah. And it'll be uplifting and life affirming to hear some of the things we're going to hear today. Yeah. Before we get to today's guest, I thought it would be interesting if we take a look at some of the benefits of volunteering. And I know we've talked about this, and it doesn't hurt to reiterate it for sure. And this list comes from sort of a mashup of information on the province of British Columbia, who has an entire section devoted to helping people volunteer at any age in the province. And if you have time to look at it, take a look at British Columbia, Canada's website, and Google volunteering. Volunteer Canada, an entire website for the nation on volunteering, and the Mayo Clinic. All of those websites we took a look at to come up with a list of why do people volunteer. And first and an obvious one is connecting to community. There's no better way to get out and meet who's in your community. And they're going to be people that are like you, interested in helping out and improving their community. Staying active gives you a reason to get up and get out and do something, no matter what your ability level is, or your mobility, I guess I should say too. It helps you transition from working full-time to retirement. And we've talked a lot about that dip when you leave your job that was such a big part of your life. You could find a new purpose. And this time there's no pay for it. But you know what? As I get older, I realize that it ain't all about money. It's pretty nice you can get paid back in a lot of different ways. On that note, it provides purpose and meaning to your life to volunteer. You can help shape and preserve your community and society generally. And I think the kind of funk that we're in many parts of the world, but North America for sure, that's a great reason to get and volunteer. A way to learn new skills while teaching others the skills you already have. And finally, meeting new people with shared interests. So yeah, if you're interested in whatever you're doing for volunteering, you already are going to hit it off with somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Dave, there's a lot to be said for the feeling of satisfaction that you get after helping other people, right? Like, I think that's a pretty strong motivation too. There's also benefits to the organizations themselves who have older adults as volunteers. So, as older adults, we bring a lot of experience, and you're gonna hear today's guests talk about that. But we've seen a lot in our lifetimes, and I think we do, as a generation, we do a pretty good job of rolling with it. And we've gained a lot of wisdom through that experience. So we bring that to the table. I also think we bring time. Now, some people might argue this one and say, well, I'm busier now in retirement than I was when I was working. And that's true for a lot of people, right? So I think time is relative. It's relative to when you did work full time or may have raised a family. But I guess what I mean by time is maybe we were a little bit more flexible with our time. Like nothing brings me more satisfaction than to be able to go for lunch with somebody in the middle of the week, right? Because I could never do that when I was working full time. So I think when I say time, I think we've got a little bit more flexibility in terms of time.
Yeah, because it for once you're your own boss, and you're a while getting used to that. I know that. Like you gotta think, oh, I have to. Oh, I don't. I can do this instead. And I mean, we've talked about the reasons why people volunteer, and to be very clear, if you can't or don't volunteer, that is in no way any judgment on your character. No. There are many, 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 many reasons, family commitments, whatever they happen to be, why you can't or don't. But Pinterest and nonprofitquarterly.org, I took a look at their website, tons of information there. We took out some reasons that older adults may not want to volunteer. And these can include fear of getting a demeaning assignment. Well, they're so-and-so, they're pretty old. Let's just have them do something that they know they could do more. And they're afraid that may be what they would be assigned. And I think largely that's only in your head. They treat their volunteers like gold, and if you want to do something else, I'm sure that they'd find a way to do that. Not wanting to be supervised by someone younger than themselves, and that is a tough one.
It is a tough one.
We have a son who's entering the workforce, and he's already finding that it's tough if you're perceived to be in any way the boss and you're much younger. So that's a hard one to swallow. I get that. Feeling burned out after a lifetime of work. And I can personally connect to that one. And I was just so ready to go and so tired out that for the first bit, there would have been almost no one that could have dragged me out to volunteer. And being too busy with family or other obligations. All legitimate reasons why someone may not volunteer. And hopefully through listening to, I don't know, great podcasts like, say, this one, they may be inspired to give it another go.
Yeah. And there's a whole spectrum of volunteering, right? Like, I think if you've never volunteered before, it's like anything else. You don't know what you don't know, and you may have some ideas or some preconceived notions. But there really is a spectrum of volunteering. And the Volunteer Canada website, volunteer.ca, really has a nice graphic that it sort of explains that spectrum. It goes from being informed to being supportive to actively participating, and then ultimately to leadership. So that's the spectrum from one end to the other. So things like informing yourself about an issue by reading a blog or even posting on that blog, right? Like that takes your time. That's a form of volunteering. Helping to raise awareness about an issue. Maybe you're gonna circulate or post some material yourself. Creating or contributing to the momentum about a matter of public concern. Maybe you create a petition, right? Or you circulate a petition, or you sign a petition. That's volunteering. Participating in chats. Maybe you organize or you initiate a chat about a particular issue. Maybe you volunteer at a special event of an organization, right? That's kind of a one-off.
Get started.
Yeah, exactly. And you could also volunteer on a short-term project. So that's a little bit of a longer commitment than a single event. You can volunteer on a regular basis, obviously. And ultimately you could be, in terms of leadership, right? You could be on the board of an organization, or you could maybe chair a major campaign. So and those are just some examples.
Yeah, they're good examples of just ways to either dip your toe or jump in.
Right, exactly.
Whatever your character is. And I was thinking when you said about educating yourself on an issue, so many ways to do that. But if you want to do it and sort of be entertained at the same time, I know that I've watched certain documentaries, and at the end of that, you think, I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
definitely want to get better informed or volunteer or donate or
Yeah.
whatever. And I know a lot of us watched many of them during COVID, because after a while, movies with the same formula got a little old, and I watched just about every TV show I was interested in. But another way, though, just to maybe educate yourself and say, that's for me. I want to do that. And I don't mean that you're going to make a documentary, but to get involved in that issue. So we have talked about, Dr. Moyne's talked about, and today's guest will talk about the importance of retiring to something. Yes. Obviously, you're going to be retiring from something, but what is it? What's your plan after retirement? And it doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be as short-term or long-term as you want, but realizing you might be retired for 2 or 3 decades, and I hope you are. To help develop some plans for your retirement, your time, what are you going to do with it? Volunteer Canada's website, and you mentioned volunteer.ca, pose some questions to consider when planning what volunteering could look like for you. So you've decided, I want to volunteer in retirement. Now, what's right for me? And they suggested that you ask yourself the following questions. Where am I in my life now? And what are my current circumstances, and what is up ahead? And that could apply to someone who maybe has some mobility issues. For example, like I want to volunteer. I have something that's maybe going to get not better, but worse. There's all sorts of circumstances to consider that lie ahead for you. And hopefully most of those circumstances are happy ones. What do I care about? How can I make a difference? And what kind of volunteer would I be? It reminds me of political campaigns. There are all sorts of people who want to volunteer, usually stuffing envelopes and those sorts of things. Not too many say, I want to go door to door because I love having doors shut in my face. But there are people who relish going door to door, and they're pretty good at it.
Yeah.
What skills or experience do I have to offer, or do I want to do again? And we've talked again a lot about don't undersell yourself. If you are retiring, you have a lifetime of experience, a lifetime of skills. There are organizations clamoring to get you in and helping them. So those are some things to consider, questions to ask yourself. Okay, you've already said, I want to retire. What's right for me? So volunteer.ca, take a look at that. I really can't say enough about Volunteer Canada and the BC Volunteer website. They're excellent.
They are. Something else people might want to think about too, and I don't know that everyone necessarily thinks about this first when they're thinking about volunteering, but what skills or experience do you want to gain, right? Because we've talked before on this podcast about the importance of continuing to keep learning as we age. And it really helps to keep our brains healthy and our minds healthy, right? And so you can pick up and learn new skills, have new experiences through volunteering. So that's something else to consider. So an organization that you could consider volunteering with that offers this wide variety of options, doesn't matter what your skill set and experience have been while you're working, right, is the Mennonite Disaster Service. So Dave mentioned this at the top. We were really honored to be able to sit down virtually with the executive director of the Mennonite Disaster Service, and that's Kevin King, to ask him about this incredible organization and the work that it does following a natural disaster anywhere in North America. So good morning, Kevin. I'm excited to welcome you to the Retirement Years podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here and learning about the program you provide. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to share about our work with Mennonite Disaster Service.
Exactly. And we're very excited about the work that you're doing, and we're pleased that you're going to be able to share with listeners what you do. So tell us a little bit more about the Mennonite Disaster Service as an organization and how long you've been involved with it.
Yes, thank you. I serve as Executive Director of Mennonite Disaster Service. It's coming up on a 75-year old organization, and I still think it's a people's movement. Mennonite Disaster Service is a volunteer organization of Anabaptist churches, but not solely limited to what we see as from Amish to Mennonite, but others as well can join in our this people's movement in getting people back home. Specifically, the mission of Mennonite Disaster Service, or you'll hear me say MDS a lot. We respond to disasters, we rebuild homes, and we restore hope by organizing and empowering volunteers in the US and Canada. So the word I want folks to hear is volunteers. We often work hard, 31 of us as staff, to make the road as level as possible from your home or church pew or house of worship to the disaster site and have a meaningful experience. So again, our where we work is throughout the US and Canada, responding to disasters all the way from the Pacific Islands to Puerto Rico, Alaska, but again, US and Canada only. Last year alone, we had 7,290 volunteers responding across Canada, giving of their time and skills, adding up to 53,000 in some days, helping 805 homes. They've been busy. They have been busy.
Well, and Kevin, we've talked a lot on the podcast about the value of volunteering and how that makes connections with other people, with your community, and just that what you get back from it is pretty incredible. And the fact that you're the umbrella organizing this, and I know there must be days it's hectic, and given those stats you just gave us, I think even bigger than Mary Ellen and I could have even imagined. So that's fantastic. And looking at your website, which I mentioned to you earlier, is a very user-friendly, very easy to access website, mds.org.
Correct.
And on there, I see that there are many ways for people to volunteer depending on where they live, what stage of life they're at, etc. So what are some of those ways that those who are, say, 55 plus can volunteer with MDS?
Absolutely. We need you. You could come and serve for a week. We call them weekly volunteers. You would arrive at a disaster site where we have a camp, and you'd arrive there after dinner Sunday evening to get your orientation, and you work through Friday afternoon, evening. We provide accommodations, we provide good meals and snacks and warm showers, and we have leadership volunteers, which I'll talk more about later, so that you have a meaningful experience. We capture your skill set and put you on a team, and then Monday morning, after the morning breakfast, we would put you on a crew that maybe aligns with your skill set. You're a painter or electrician, or if you have 2 hands and 2 feet, we're going to make you tired before the day's over. We might be putting down vinyl planking or framing, electrical. We may need someone even to sit on the front porch and talk to the disaster survivor and just hear their story. That too is crucial role in this recovery process. Volunteers, we often say, come as strangers, but they leave as friends with the disaster survivor. And not only that, is at these different, I call them camps, but we call them project sites. For example, right now at this moment, this recording, there are 16 locations where volunteers could be serving across the U.S., from California to Florida to Eastern Shore, Maryland. These were floods, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, and hammers are ringing hope. Volunteers not only help rebuild homes or muck out or clean up or run a chainsaw in a disaster site, but to receive these weekly volunteers, another way of volunteering is we need leadership volunteers, and we'll train you. We would ask that the leadership volunteers come for 4 weeks or more. Well, what would I do? How would I be trained? Well, we need cooks. We need assistant cooks to feed 20, 30 hungry volunteers. You might say, I've never cooked for that many people. No worries. We have a cookbook. We have training, actual hands-on training. We need an office manager at each of these 16 locations right now. We need crew leaders to gather up the tools, drive the pickup and the tool trailer out to the site. We need construction supervisors, retired contractors. We need you to help us lead the way through in rebuilding and repairing of homes. And then, of course, at each one of these 16 locations are project directors. And you say, well, do I have to be a contractor or retired contractor? No. Actually, some of our best project directors have been high school principals or school superintendents. Why? Because they're teamwork people. They pull a team together and they may say, I don't know too much about framing or roofing a house, but I'm going to pull in the knowledge of my construction supervisor. Or, hey, you know, we have some vegetarians this week. I don't know. That's why your cook is there. So it's teamwork. Believe it or not, we have a lot of Amish coming and working on our projects. In fact, some of the locations, it's strictly Amish. But when you have that many, we need drivers. So they come on a bus and we have 12-passenger vans and pickups. So we need English drivers, is what they would call you. And so folks come and stay for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or more. If you don't feel like you want to travel, you want to sleep in your own bed at night, I would say go to the website, David, as you mentioned, go to our website and find in your state what we call units. Red Cross might call them chapters. We call them units. Contact your local unit coordinator and say, hey, I'd like to sign up. I'm interested in doing something meaningful and help somebody out. We need local people to sign up for early response and be engaged locally for local disasters too. You don't have to go to California or Crisfield, Maryland, or Arcadia, Florida to make a difference. Some of these jobs can be done locally. Last but not least, we have volunteers who say, but Kevin, I need to sleep in my own bed at night. Fine, we say. Then bring your RV. So we have what we call RV groups. I just came back from Grand Isle, Louisiana, Saturday night. There we have a team way down into the Gulf, south of Louisiana, responding to Hurricane Ida. And there, these volunteers, they may say, but I can't get up at 6:30 in the morning and work till 5. And we say, you're right. So let's work from 9 to 4, 4 days a week. And you come for 4 weeks at a time. And it's a real blessing because you get to know 5 or 6 other couples. You're a group and get to know each other. And you develop long-term relationships with the community. And I could talk much more about that. But yeah, back to you.
So all these amazing opportunities I'm hearing, Kevin, in your opinion, what is it that older adult volunteers bring to the table in the face of a natural disaster? Like what makes them so invaluable in a time of crisis?
Oh, good question. You ought to have a podcast about that. Well, as Jim Collins once wrote, someone once, and if I recall, this is the most productive years for citizens post-retirement. Why do I say that? Well, retirees have that capacity to deal with life adversity and resilience. You've about seen it all. And for you, when I say you, for our listeners, retirees, this isn't, you're used to many problems being thrown at you. A 13-year-old, when their shoelace breaks, it's the end of the world. But as a retiree, it's something you smile and you make do and you keep going. So retirees have experienced a lot. And so when you get to a disaster project, you are dealing with adversity, you are dealing with chaos, you are dealing with people who are hurting and need a listening ear or a hug and to say, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm with you. And I want to walk with you, especially those RV volunteers that are there in Grand Isle right now, walking with the homeowners, make a profound difference. And they become a family to themselves as well, because they these RVs have grandchildren and they miss seeing them and going to their maybe basketball games or soccer games or whatever, spelling bees. And yet they're a family to themselves, and they develop a community to themselves. I think retirees they can mentor the younger generation. You don't have to be an RVer, but the retirees that are among our younger folks. In fact, I'd say 45% of our volunteers are under 35 years old. So retirees have a lot to teach our young people. They have life's experience, ingenuity. When you're repairing a home, man, it's different than a new home. You're figuring out on the go how to make it happen.
You know, as I was listening to you talk about that, Kevin, I was thinking that if anyone felt, and we know people do in retirement, that they're kind of stuck or they're floundering a bit or whatever, imagine the boost to your soul and your esteem, your self-esteem, if you took that plunge to go and do one of these and just make those connections and feel so important at the time. And important is maybe not the right word, but needed, and to have that purpose. That would be and it doesn't, and I mean, this is the perfect opportunity. And as you said at the outset, you're trying everything you can to make it as accessible and user-friendly to anybody to come and join. So I think that's an important part of what we'll get out of today, that if you just put that foot forward and take a little, and like you said, you don't have to own an RV, just show up somewhere where you can. Which brings me to the next question, and I know you must have one. Well, one is an understatement. Many stories about the impact that older adults have made as volunteers. And is there anything in particular, and I know that could be putting you on the spot, but where you can recall that clearly, where someone with that wisdom and experience and empathy played a very important role?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I should write a book. I could give you 3 stories. Some time ago, I got a letter from, trying to keep this as general to protect the person's privacy, but he's a pastor. And he wrote me a letter and said, top of the letter said, "Look what Rita did to me." And he says, "I'm a pastor. I was burned out. And so I signed up for your project and I went for a week. And in fact, in your information sheet, I didn't say that I was a pastor, because I was afraid someone would call on me to provide a devotional or to preach or something. I was burned out." So he said, as the week went on, drinking coffee, playing volleyball at night, laughing and crying with the homeowner and the disaster survivors, working alongside, side by side, from volunteers from all over the U.S., strangers. He said that early in the morning in the dark, I would walk down the street just to clear my head. And then I saw it, he writes. Spray painted on the garage door of one of the houses was, "Look what Rita did to me, Hurricane Rita." And people often spray paint in front of their house for the insurance, State Farm, so on, who to call. But this person spray painted, "Look what Rita did to me." And in this letter, this pastor said, "Kevin, thank you for allowing me to volunteer for MDS. This was healing. Singing, praying, laughing, eating wonderful food restored my faith in humanity. Thank you. Look what Rita did to me." It's often our volunteers say, "I think I gained more than what I gave." And yes, it's giving of ourselves. I think of another, and if I may, another experience about a homeowner that in Birmingham, Alabama, where they had tornadoes years ago. I learned that, well, there's many disaster survivors we work with, and at this particular home, This needed major repair on the house after the tornado, and the homeowner, the gentleman, could barely walk. He was depressed. I would say not the best picture of health. And here again, with RVers, the recreational vehicle folks, volunteers, day in and day out would show up and repair his house one at a time, move his chair so they could work around him, and they'd have lunch under the tree. And day by day, they kept coming back and repairing ceilings, walls, new roof. And one day the windows were quite dirty, so some of the volunteers decided to go ahead and wash the windows. Next day, literally, the retired volunteers came to work, and outside in the yard to greet them was the homeowner, standing there with a cup of coffee in his hand. It was like the light switch was turned on and he was walking. So in times we not only restore homes, but we restore lives just by the care, the relationships. Again, there's something to that, it's more than just cleaning windows, but it's cleaning the debris out of, I guess, our minds by walking with people and saying, I value you.
Kevin, those are fantastic stories. I'm sure you have many, but those are certainly two poignant ones. So listen, how can listeners learn more about volunteer opportunities with MDS?
Yeah, we would welcome that. I also should say, what people might say, well, how much does it cost? Your only cost is actually to get to the job site where you go. So on our website, people can volunteer. So whether it's in La Planada, California, Arcadia, Florida, or Dawson Springs, Kentucky, and on into the future, people might say, well, I want to go next June. Where can I go? Well, if you can tell me where the disaster is, then you... No, actually, our main niche, and I should have said this right up front, is in the recovery phase of disaster. We're not in the search and rescue. Well, we do have one unit that does search and rescue. And we do some chainsaw debris removal, tarping, but 99% of our volunteer efforts often starts at 6 months to a year later after the disaster, discerning who has insurance, who doesn't, titles to the homes. Obviously, volunteers don't want to come and work on somebody's fish camp or hunting cabin. So we have to do working with local partners in figuring out who's home and having the money. So your question, how can I sign? Go to our website, probably the best, MDS, Mennonite Disaster Service, mds.org, or in Canada, folks can call 866-261-1274. Again, in Canada, 866-261-1274. And take a look there at our website. If you're in Canada and you hear this, go to the website. It'll take you automatically to our Canadian website. In the US, it's 800-241-8111. Or folks can even contribute. You know, you can volunteer to go to your desk, pull out the checkbook, and send us. It costs us about $50 a day. So I'll shamelessly put in a plug that we are a volunteer organization, and based upon donations, we can feed these volunteers when they get to the job site, or we put gas in the pickup, or have safe tools, or a safe and warm place to sleep at night, or in the summer, air conditioned. Also, I'm just going to also say, beyond Mennonite Disaster Service, we're part of a national network. So even greater opportunity is a group called National VOAD. That's NVOAD.org. And actually, I serve as vice chair of that consortium, or that group that formed in 1970. There's 76 national agencies of us in the US, I should say. So there's Salvation Army, the Red Cross, Suchi Foundation, United Methodist Committee on Relief, Southern Baptist, Adventist, Samaritan's Purse, on and on. Did I say 76? Yes. So that site alone is it's a huge field out there, Mary Ellen and David, of where volunteers are so needed in responding to disaster service. What we shared today with Mennonite Disaster Service, our niche, as I said, is rebuilding homes. But there are those needed to do case management, to do volunteer setups, to do feeding meals, running a shelter. So this is a huge opportunity for volunteers. Again, nvoad.org, National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster.
Kevin, was there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't ask?
Well, I've been doing this work for 20 some years as executive director of Mennonite Disaster Service. And one way to rebuild a home after a disaster would be to just send a check and hire a contractor and get it done. There's something missing about the human element. When volunteers come and walk alongside the disaster survivor and rebuild hope, you're not only rebuilding a home, but you're rebuilding hope. Often these disaster survivors think their world has ended. I had even two county judges in the early response things. Volunteers were going down the street. They lost a lot of their trees in their yard. Two county judges said, we see a lot of bad stuff, adjudicating things. But after I saw these volunteers come down the street, again, you restored my faith in humanity. And that's what volunteers can do, not only for yourself, but rebuild hope. That's what it's about.
Well,
it is. And I love that. I love that.
And Kevin, we talked again about that equilibrium where when you volunteer or give, you get back a lot. Mary Ellen and I have learned an incredible amount by just doing our little podcast and talking to people, and the people we meet through connections, through networking. It's amazing because I mean, that at least the internet does have a good use. And this has allowed us to speak with people like yourself. And 2 points, your organization is wonderful. Like, it's like you say, it's hopefully we're bringing some stories that restore some of that faith in humanity, because there are those who'd like to tear that down a bit, and we get kind of tired of that. And stories like this are needed, and hopefully listeners today kind of go, wow, I'm going to look into more opportunities or whatever they take from this. But you personally, Kevin, as a spokesperson for the organization, you're great at what you do, and it's part of the reason why you are where you are, I'm sure. But there's a real genuine personality and character there, and we appreciate that. And it means a whole lot more coming from someone with that sort of approach. So again, thank you so much. And Mary Ellen, I know you feel the same.
I'll just add, if it works, it works. But why this? I remember I grew up on a farm in southeastern Pennsylvania, and our barn burnt. And even before the ashes were done cooling, farmers started showing up in pickups and trucks, and people in droves coming to help clean up. And then at the local fire hall, there were meals and sandwiches were being made. And as a young boy, I saw my dad, who's usually brave and strong, brings tears to my eyes, stand up in that fire hall and cry and say, thank you for coming. You're not alone in this loss. We lost cows, we lost equipment. We had people stuffing cash and checks in Dad's pocket, giving heifers to start over again. Maybe that inspired me as a young boy.
Yeah.
And volunteers out there listening, you don't know how you may inspire somebody someday. May it be so.
That's an excellent place to wrap up. That's for sure.
Thank you. Thanks for the work you guys do.
Since we mentioned barriers to volunteering today, I think it's important to highlight what Kevin said about they try to level the playing field to welcome all volunteers, any age, any ability. And I like how he even got it right down to, if you have 2 hands and 2 feet, we'll get you working and make you tired. Yeah. And after listening to Kevin and how inclusive the organization is, I'm pretty sure that anyone including anyone who may not have 2 hands and 2 feet, and I'm not being facetious,
No.
they would find a place, because it's not just about, as he pointed out, rebuilding those homes. It's about rebuilding hope and souls. And everybody could have some impact and volunteer with MDS, and just another reason why I quite admire their organization.
Oh, absolutely. I loved what he said about post-retirement being the most productive stage of a person's life. Like, absolutely, I'm here for that. And that's, again, though, that's if they choose, right? Like, it isn't the most productive stage for some people because they don't choose to make it so. I remember an opportunity that my husband and I took with our kids when they were, I think they were maybe early teens. We went and participated on a Habitat for Humanity build. And I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to do that, but it's absolutely incredible. And again, you don't need to be particularly skilled at any one thing. They're really good at giving you things to do that fit your skill level. And that's another great organization that's always looking for volunteers. And of course, there's many local Habitat for Humanity chapters or whatever across Canada and the US and around the globe, right? So anyway, check out habitat.org. That's another great organization. I'm going to make a public commitment here to spend at least a week with MDS in 2024. I was really moved by the impact that the work MDS does. It not only on the volunteers, but on the disaster survivors, right? Like you were mentioning that. And I love the language that he used, disaster survivors, not victims, because it is about hope, right? And really it's restoring faith in the good of humanity. And I've always believed that humanity overall is good.
Well, and what we've done before, and we've done again this time, when something like this impacts us, and hope it impacts you as well, we have made a donation to MDS. So on behalf of the podcast.
Yeah.
Just one more thing about Kevin's interview, his story about his family losing their barn. It's so, you can picture it as he's telling, like as he said, as the the embers were just stopping glowing, kind of thing. People came from around the community unasked. They just came because that's what you do in community, and started the rebuilding process. Then the potluck they put together and fundraised, and how difficult it was for a proud man like his dad to accept charity. And that small pebble in the pond, you could say, and that touched Kevin, and look what he's done with it. And I mean, that's quite a story, and look what he's doing. But for anyone, and I think you and I've talked about this, like every time travel movie, everybody worries that if you do something in the future, then you come back, then you're going to impact what happens. You've changed everything. Well, then why can't we do that when we're here? Just do that little good thing, and that ripple goes out, and I don't need to see it. I just like to know maybe it did. And it can be as simple as smiling at someone in a day, or holding the door, or talking to them, right up to whatever other great thing you want to do for someone. So that story will stick with me quite a while, about how that turned Kevin into Kevin. And look what he's doing with the impact of what community did for them. And now he's paying back in spades.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Kevin, thank you for being on the podcast, and thank you for leading the important work that MDS is doing in the area of disaster recovery. I really encourage listeners to check out mds.org, check out habitat.org, and if you're in Canada, check out volunteer.ca. There are so many worthy organizations that are making a difference in your community and around the world, and you could be a valuable part of making that difference.
And like any pre-recorded program that you put up for the enjoyment of others, we don't get a lot of face-to-face with people that we know are listening, and others that will listen. And when we get that feedback, it's great. And one person in particular we're going to thank right now for the inspiration behind this episode goes out to Dr. Brenda Phillips. And Brenda's a loyal listener, And she has been in touch with you, I know, Mary Ellen, like on
Yeah.
her own time quite a bit. And
Yeah.
she suggested that we speak with Kevin. And we are eternally grateful for that because it turned out to be a wonderful guest and I hope a good episode for people to listen to.
Yeah.
And we hope that you'll take the time to follow us on our social media platforms, whichever one that you happen to be on. You can find us easily. Just put the Retirement Years Podcast, you'll find us. And that you'll consider subscribing to our YouTube channel that we now have.
Mhm.
And then once we've got you, if you go over to our website, theretirementyearspodcast.com, you will see that we have merchandise that you may want to treat yourself to or to get for someone else. And again, that's up to you, but it's there and we'd like you to drop by and take a look.
So be sure to tune in next week when we're speaking with two guests about the work that they do as end-of-life doulas.
Mm.
You may be in the same boat as we are and had only ever heard of doulas in the context of childbirth. So just as there are doulas trained to support the process of bringing a human being into the world, there are also doulas trained to support the process of humans leaving the world. And we're going to talk with two of them next week. So until then, I'm Mary Ellen.
And I'm Dave.
Stay well.
You have been listening to the Retirement Years Podcast, social media marketing and management provided by Madison Sloan at MSS Mad Media. Original music by Theodora Draper. Web design by Gavin Hinton.